So we're going to move on to another big subject area, which is lactose intolerance, which as a European from a high consuming dairy market is something that I consume on a regular basis. 50% of Filipinos are actually lactose intolerant, and Chinese heritage even higher, nearly 80% or 83% are lactose intolerant by their DNA. So first of all, let's hear from Zafreena from the Philippines.
Hi, my name is Zafreena. I'm 39 years old. About a year ago, I started noticing that I often felt uncomfortable bloating after eating, and it really bothered me. So to support my gut health, I began exploring dietary changes and focusing on adding more fiber-rich foods like fruits and vegetables. I've also been incorporating more probiotics and fermented foods to help balance my digestion. A family member actually mentioned that I might be lactose intolerant, so I've decided to limit dairy as well. It's been a process discovering what works best for my body, and so far these changes are already helping me avoid that uncomfortable feeling and making me feel so much better.
So Eva, on this one, maybe start us off. So we hear here that there's a direct assumption between bloating and dairy consumption, right? So can you maybe give me some examples? Like I'm assuming that is not necessarily the case, but there was a direct kind of correlation that Zafreena's friend said, look, you're bloated, therefore you must be dairy intolerant. But is that a direct analogy?
Yeah, look, there's lots of different reasons why someone might experience gut issues. So a food intolerance, so perhaps lactose intolerance, like she mentioned, gluten insensitivity, or other small fermentable fibres known as FODMAPs. They can all cause bloating within the gut. So it could be a number of those. And I really liked the way she was saying she's taking an approach where she's eliminating and seeing how she's feeling, because that's how a dietitian would propose you work. So you would cut out some foods and see, do you feel better? There are other reasons why she might have gut health issues. Stress is a key one. If you have stress, there's a really direct link between our gut and our brain. So if we're feeling stressed, we're likely to feel it in our stomach as well. So there's lots of reasons why she might be feeling that, but yeah, she's doing the right thing in terms of eliminating the foods that she thinks it might be, and then testing. Yeah.
Okay. And with the increasing importance of gut health for these consumers, what do you think the next steps are?
I think we're heading towards a personalized nutrition plan, right? And we have people who are collecting their health data. So we need to make the leap to connect their data with their action plan and start to look at diet, something that we can calibrate on a daily, even a mealtime basis. So potentially having our data tell us, I need a little bit of a vitamin C hit, or I need a little bit more fiber in this meal, in order to take kind of a long view to our diet, rather than just one meal delivering every single thing that we need. If we've had an indulgent dinner, for example, how do we spend the next day kind of making it more balanced rather than making it up?
Okay. And I think you were going to add some things there around biomes.
That's right. I'm glad you mentioned it to me, because our personal biome is actually the focus right now, right? As she talks about kind of her gut health and what's happening in there, she's doing individual calibration. In the future, and this is really in the future, is we'll be able to see kind of the city biome and how a city's internal kind of resources, plant and animal life contribute to the biome of a human being, and how that's going to be special according to where we live and what we eat, because our food systems will be a little bit more local as well. And that will contribute part of that data that comes into my stream so that I can make the decisions as well. Don't forget that we'll probably have another data stream around my carbon credits, because that's going to give me a lot more permission about what I can eat and what I can't, depending on how much impact I want to have on the world.
And Oliver, we'd heard about fermentation, and that's something that seems to be a growing trend in food across the board, in pickling and fermented drinks, except the bushes they have in mixology. Tell us a bit about the trend in fermentation and from a hospitality perspective.
Yeah, I think this is a really important and ultimately will be quite an influential trend, because this is one that goes across sort of what would be my background in food service, which is relatively uniquely fine dining, like fine dining or very close to. But fermentation is one of these things that can definitely permeate into a much larger food sector, and I think probably precision fermentation in general is, as an emerging tech, is one of the most interesting sort of flavor creation mechanisms that we're seeing at the moment. From a personal perspective, we do a lot of fermentation in restaurant in at least in Penang. We have like separate chillers just to ferment stuff in, and we're actually, to speak to sort of gut health maybe more so than lactose intolerance, like designing menus in a way that it should limit people's glucose spikes. It should have anti-inflammatory properties throughout the menu while trying not to compromise anything in terms of deliciousness. And I think you'll see more of that in the fine dining space as well, hopefully as well as sort of the mass market space. Yeah, the incorporation of probiotic elements, whether it's fermented foods or even, you know, encapsulated probiotics or mixing probiotics into a fast food experience, is a really compelling notion to me. I think we have to be a little bit careful about it in general, but it seems like a really good solution to avoid scenarios like she's facing in the video, and like anybody might face after they have like a really heavy meal or you know, an indulgent meal. Let's go with that, yeah.
Gut health and probiotics are the #1 searched health claim on the websites on the internet. So it's a really big space for exploration.
Oh, great to know.
But when we talk about Europe and European heritage for me, right, and for our business, right, and this trend of dairy replacement, Ange, right? I guess my question is, what's the place of dairy in Asia, like in a space where it's not historically been there as part of the diet?
I think that's a great question. So I'm going to take you back into being a futurist also means being a historian to some extent, because sometimes I look backwards in order to see how people behaved. And I think about how dairy was introduced to Asia. And it was very much cheese slices, but also 1 cup of dairy a day. And so some of our very early thinking about how do we get people to drink dairy in Asia was very much, let's have everyone drink 1 cup. That's a really great way to grow. But what you see in Asia is actually we don't have that historical relationship with dairy. So dairy is a new ingredient that we want to invent. We want to invent new dishes with, right? So one of the, in NUS, which is where kind of I do a lot of my study, the students have dairy with tea, right? But it's cheese, not milk. In Hong Kong, we have dairy as a pudding, as a dessert, and it's a steamed milk. Right? So there's different ways that we're approaching dairy. And I think where I would, if dairy, and when dairy has a role in kind of the cultural diet of the region, is when we invent it rather than when we absorb it or adopt it. And I think that's a really great way to think about it, because there are so many new ways we can have dairy that we just haven't thought about. It's such a versatile ingredient, but at the same time, what I see right now, particularly in the older age group, is how we use dairy products as a substitute for protein. And I think, you can probably talk a little bit about that.
Dairy is a really nutritious food group. It's the only food group that has all the, vitamins and minerals that we need, protein, fat, etc. So it is used as a kind of fortifying agent. So maybe that's the role of it here in terms of bringing protein, bringing certain micronutrients into the diet then as well.